"They stole all my clothes, Cowboy. Please help me." The cry echoed from the lake, where an Apache woman was caught in an unbelievable situation. And this was only the beginning of the strangest tale from the Wild West you are about to witness. Before we dive straight into the events, if you find this gripping, hit that like button right now and tell us where you are watching from, so we can keep sending you the most dramatic legends from this frontier land. The fiery red sunset stretched across the barren sand hills. Reed Callahan, once an army scout, rode home after a long day mending broken fences. He lived alone, withdrawn, ever since the sickness took his wife 3 years ago. Reed thought tonight would be as quiet as any other, but in just a few minutes, his life would turn down a road no one could have predicted. Reed was thinking about the section of fence he needed to replace when he caught sight of a figure by the water. He first thought it was a deer, but the shape did not look right. He slid off the saddle, tied his horse to a low branch, and moved quietly through the dry grass. When he parted the willow brush, his heart froze. A young Apache woman was standing waist deep in the cold stream, her clothes nearly torn to shreds. Her tangled black hair clung to her thin shoulders, her body shivering, her eyes wide with terror. Bruises ran down her arms, clear proof she had just escaped an assault. She crossed her arms over her chest, pointing to the muddy bank where scraps of fabric lay scattered. Her voice rasped. "They took everything from me, Cowboy. Please." Reed stood still. His instincts as a former scout warned him. Victims were rarely alone. Someone might be hiding, waiting for him to make a mistake. But her eyes wavered raw fear, despair so sharp it suffocated. Slowly, Reed removed his heavy canvas coat, holding it out. No sudden moves, no wasted steps, showing he was no threat. She stared straight into his eyes, as if searching for honesty. After a long pause, she snatched the coat and wrapped it tight around herself. Reed stepped closer, steadying her elbow. Her skin was ice cold, her bare legs trembling so badly she could not stand. At that very moment, a twig snapped behind the thicket. Reed spun, his hand instinctively gripping the revolver. Someone was close. Reed guided her toward the bank, but when her knees buckled, he lifted her in his arms, as if carrying a bundle of hay. She was shockingly light. She did not speak, only clutched at his shirt, curling inward as though even the wind terrified her. The trail home wound over rough red dust. The horse moved half a pace slower than usual, while Reed scanned every bush and ridge for hidden rifles. His cabin appeared on the rise. One roof, one porch, one door. Reed dismounted and eased her down. She nearly stumbled, but forced herself to stand, eyes still wary. Inside, the lantern's dull yellow glow lit the rough wooden walls. Everything remained neat, just as it had when his wife was alive. A small bed, a worn table, 2 chairs, a stove with stacked firewood. Reed spread a blanket near the fire, his voice calm. "Sit here, get warm." She obeyed silently, still clutching the coat like armor. Her eyes darted across the cabin, as if waiting for someone to burst in. Reed asked no questions. He fed the fire, hung a kettle, then pulled out a box of needle and thread. Each stitch was slow, steady, not pretty, but strong. She never stopped watching him, as if trying to decide whether he was an enemy or a man worth trusting. When the kettle whistled, the room grew warm enough for her trembling to ease. Reed set her patched dress on a chair and leaned against the wall. He could now see the bruises, the rope burns etched deep into her skin. She drew a breath, steadying herself. Reed spoke softly. "You are safe here tonight. Tomorrow we will figure things out." She gave no answer, but her clenched hands loosened on the blanket. Outside, the wind hissed through cottonwoods. Inside, the fire cracked, shadows dancing across two strangers clinging to the fragile safety of each other. Reed sat at the table facing the door, his rifle across his lap. He had sheltered many wanderers before scouts, deserters, frightened strangers. But this was different. He did not know who she was, who had hurt her, or if they would come hunting. She curled by the fire, her breathing slowly steadying. In the lantern light, Reed saw the faint shimmer of tears on her face, and he realized some souls, no matter how broken in body, carried a steel core that refused to yield. The night held quiet until the faint rhythm of hoofbeats echoed from afar, carried by the wind. Reed stiffened, his grip tightening on the rifle. Someone was drawing near. 9 minutes, 500 words. Reed never closed his eyes that night. He sat at the wooden table, rifle laid across his thighs, gaze locked on the door. The fire in the stove dwindled to embers, shadows swallowing the walls, leaving only flickers of trembling light. Behind him, the woman curled under blankets, her uneven breaths betraying a readiness for the door to crash open. He had sheltered strangers before scouts, deserters, but this was different. He did not know her name, nor what hunted her. That ignorance alone kept him awake. When the first silver light of dawn bled through the cracks in the wall, he rekindled the fire. The popping wood startled her awake. She clutched the coat tightly around her shoulders. Reed set a coffee pot on the stove, his voice steady. There is a water basin outside the porch. No one comes near here this time of day. She studied him a moment, then nodded. As she stepped out, the coat slipped, revealing deep red grooves across her shoulders, rope burns, rubbed raw. Reed saw, but pretended to busy himself chopping wood, giving her privacy. When she returned, she sat by the fire, her fingers trembling slightly. Reed poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. She hesitated long before accepting. "What is your name?" he asked. "Aria. I am Reed Callahan. Do you want to tell me what happened?" Aria stayed silent, her hands wrapped around the cup, drawing warmth. At last she spoke, voice flat and chilling. 3 men, white men. I passed through town yesterday. They stopped me, laughing, and tore everything away. Reed's jaw clenched. Clothes, food, they threw it all in the mud. Few words, yet enough for Reed to picture it. Drunk young men in a saloon, treating cruelty as sport. And Aria, a lone woman, was an easy target. "Do you have family nearby?" he asked. "No. I am heading north, looking for work. There is nothing left for me in the south." Reed understood. He had heard of villages burned by the army, homes scattered, families torn apart. For Aria, survival itself was a victory. He weighed the options. Bringing her into town would only invite trouble. Sending her on alone was certain death. At last he said, "You can stay here for a while, at least until you know where you want to go." There, her dark eyes flickered, testing him. "Why?" "Because I do not let someone starve on my doorstep," Reed answered. At that very moment, the pounding of hoofbeats rolled again through the valley, louder than the night before. Reed and Aria locked eyes. Both understood. They were not finished with her yet. 9, 12 minutes, 500, 600 words. Aria said nothing more, only clutching the coat tighter around her shoulders, as if it were the last wall between herself and the world. After breakfast, Reed handed her the dress he had mended the night before. The stitching was rough, but it would do. He turned his back on purpose while she changed. Only when her quiet voice said, "I am finished," did he turn again. The dress pulled tight across her chest where he had sewn it too close, and Reed flushed red before snatching up his hat. "I have work to do," You can stay in the house or come with me. Then I will come, Arya answered quickly, as if staying behind alone was far worse. Together they went to check the fences. Arya limped but did not complain, and before long she was helping holding wire, steadying posts. Under the noontime sun, they stopped by a creek. Arya bent to wash the mud from her feet, her back fully turned to him. Reed said softly, "You do not need to keep watching your back here." Arya replied flatly, "I watch it for myself." Reed could only sigh. Trust was not something you could ask for. He realized that from this day on, he carried an added burden, not just the ranch, but this Apache girl as well. By evening, they returned to the cabin. Reed handed her a needle and scraps of fabric. "Do you know how to sew?" Arya gave a small nod. While she bent over her work, Reed busied himself stacking damp firewood. For the first time, the little cabin echoed with the simple sounds of a household, thread snapping through cloth, wood thudding in piles. When sunset painted the mountains red, Arya finished a neat seam. Her fingers were thin but steady, her eyes catching the firelight with a glimmer of focus and resolve. That night, Reed sat on the porch, rifle resting across his knees, eyes fixed on the dark woods. Inside, Arya slept, wrapped in a blanket near the stove, her breathing steadier than before. Reed knew danger had not passed. The young men from town could appear at any time. And just as the thought crossed his mind, a long howl echoed from deep in the valley, blending with the faint thunder of hooves. Reed shot upright, hand gripping the rifle. Inside, Arya jolted awake, her wide eyes gleaming in the darkness. The hunters had begun to close in. At dawn, the sky was pale grey. Reed stepped onto the porch, his breath steaming in the chill. He froze when he saw Arya already sitting on the bed's edge, still wrapped tightly in the coat. "Are you riding out?" she asked. "I need to go into town," Reed replied, pulling his hat low. "Better to see Clay and his boys in the saloon than wait for them to ride up to my door." Arya's face tensed. She wanted to follow, but Reed shook his head. "You are safer here. The door has a bolt. There is a rifle behind the table. Use it if you must." Her eyes flashed with a determination that looked nothing like weakness. Reed rode into town on empty roads. He tied his horse at the stable and entered the saloon, thick with sweat and stale liquor. Ordering a cup of coffee, he sat in a shadowed corner, watching the door. It did not take long. Two young men strutted in, laughter loud and cocky. Leading them was clay greasy hair under a filthy hat, eyes darting like a snake's. The moment he saw Reed, his grin died. He squared his shoulders and spoke loudly enough for the whole saloon. There he island, the cowboy keeping a wild creature in his house. Reed did not move. "Say what you came to say," Clay smirked. "The girl runs fast. We were only having a little fun." Reed set down his cup and stood. Chairs scraped. The saloon hushed. "If you set foot on my land again, you will not walk away," Reed said, voice hard as stone. Clay raised his brows, still defiant. "You think you can keep her?" Reed's hand hovered near his revolver, but he did not draw. "I think you had better finish your drink and get out." The barkeep muttered nervously, "Take it outside, boys." Clay spat on the floor, then turned with his companion and left, the door slamming like a gunshot. Reed drained his coffee. He knew they would not let this go. At least now he had seen their faces, knew his enemy. As he stepped to leave, a stranger caught him at the doorway, voice low. "Careful, Callahan. Clay has 3 more with him. They say tonight they are riding toward your ranch." Reed stiffened, his eyes dark. The real fight was yet to come. He returned under a blistering Sunday. From afar, he saw Arya sitting on the porch, clutching a wooden stick like a weapon. "You found them," she asked. Yes, they know I am waiting. Inside, he brought flour he had bought. Together they kneaded dough, baked bread, an ordinary act that softened Arya's face for a rare moment. While the loaf cooked, Reed laid out his rifle, showing her how to load. Arya tried, hands steady enough to make him nod. Good, but only if there is no other choice. That night, they ate bread by the fire. Arya sat so close, her knee nearly touched his. Later, when Reed spread his blanket by the door as usual, Arya quietly dragged her own closer. No words, no distance. Just as the fire dimmed, Reed spotted a flicker in the woods, a campfire that did not belong. He tightened his grip on the rifle. Arya saw it too. No words were needed. They both knew trouble was near. Reed snuffed the lantern. The cabin sank into darkness, lit only by the stove's faint glow. He lay close to the door, ears straining. A faint rustle, 2 figures creeping along the fence. Not travellers. Reed slid the bolt, whispering, 2 men. If they go for the barn, I will take them. You hold the door. If they come through fire. Arya nodded, clutching the rifle, eyes unblinking. On the porch, one man bent toward the barn gate. The door burst open. Reed lunged out, gun levelled. Hands off. The pair froze. In the moonlight, Reed saw clearly Clay, with that mocking smile. Arya held her breath, finger on the trigger. The enemy had shown his face. Evening, Callahan, Clay sneered. We only wanted a look. You have looked enough. Leave. Reed's voice was ice. The second man tugged Clay's arm. Not worth it. But Clay spat in the dirt. You think you can keep her? Try me, Reed answered, his rifle aimed steady. At last Clay turned, vanishing with his companion into the trees. Reed stood guard until the hoofbeats faded before stepping back inside. Arya was crouched by the door, rifle trembling in her hands. If they come back, you could drive me away. It would be easier for you. Reed shook his head. The trouble is theirs, not yours. Running will only feed their fire. In her eyes flickered something different, the first spark of trust. The next day dawned grey. They worked the yard in silence, tension strung tight as a bowstring. By afternoon, the rain came hard. They hauled firewood under the porch. Arya asked quietly, Are you not afraid? Reed admitted, Inside, I am shaking. Her gaze softened. For the first time, she saw he was just a man, not carved from stone. That night, rain thundered on the roof. Arya sat brushing her hair, whispering, You stood up for me. Reed lifted his eyes. I will not let them take anything more from you. A pause lingered, then Arya stepped closer, her hand resting on his shoulder right where the ropes had scarred her. This was no longer only survival. This was the beginning of something more. Reed held her hand, his voice rough. Are you certain? Arya nodded. The kiss began soft, then deepened as she clutched his shirt. That night, Reed did not lie on the floor. He sat at the edge of the bed until Arya pulled him beside her. At first there was space between them, but soon her head rested on his shoulder. Reed wrapped his arm around her, listening as her breathing slowed. Outside, the rain cleared. Inside, there was peace. For the first time in years, Reed truly slept, not reaching for a gun, but holding Arya's hand resting on his chest. The sun rose after the storm. Reed took Arya into town. Eyes followed them, rumours already running ahead. At the store, a young man blocked the door. Arya tensed, but Reed stepped in front. Take your business elsewhere. The man backed off. Whispers grew heavier when they left the blacksmith's. Clay, drunk and swaggering in the street, shouted about, The girl in Callahan's house. Arya whispered, They will come for us. Reed answered, and I will be ready. On the ride back, Arya said, I used to run, not any more. Reed nodded. For the first time, he declared openly before the town, She is staying with me, a statement like a slap across Clay's face. By the third evening, dust rose thick on the horizon. 3 riders thundered into the yard. Reed stepped out, rifle in hand. Clay leapt down. She does not belong to you. Reed replied, Whether she stays or goes, that is her choice. The door creaked open. Arya appeared with a rifle, her voice firm. I stay. Clay froze, then sneered. You do not understand. No, I do, Arya shot back, cold and steady. You stripped me once, but I will not run again. The air grew heavy as iron. Clay stepped forward. Reed raised his rifle. The other 2 men panicked, dragging him back. At last, Clay swung onto his horse and rode off. Inside, Arya trembled, yet her eyes blazed. She rushed to Reed, pulling him close. This kiss was fierce, certain. They were no longer alone. That night, Reed said, Tomorrow we go to the sheriff. It must be clear. Arya nodded. I want them to know I will not run any more. At sunrise, they rode into town together. Reed helped Arya down and led her into the sheriff's office. Clay Jensen and his men threatened her on my land. Sheriff Harper sighed. Clay has caused trouble before. I will warn him. Reed's voice was iron. If they step onto my land again, I will not stop at words. The sheriff turned to Arya. Do you want to make a formal charge? Arya straightened. I want them to stay away. I will not run again. Oh, the sheriff nodded, writing it down. When they left, Arya walked with her head high, not avoiding the stairs. Her choice was made. Back at the ranch, Arya said softly, I choose. I stay. Reed answered, Then we will make this a home. Together they planted seeds, mended fences, cooked meals. Life shifted from mere shelter to the building of a household. One night by the fire, Reed whispered, Now, this is home. Yes, Arya replied, resting her head against him. Outside, danger had not vanished, but inside the small wooden cabin, the most important things were already theirs. Trust, choice, and a love strong enough to stand against the dust and the desert. Final message. Home is not a place, it is the person you choose to stay with. If you believe that too, hit like, subscribe, and share to catch the next story.